you'd agree that one of the kind of obligations of a journalist is to go to where the silences are.
No, I mean, I actually admire, like I said, I'm not teasing as of a way to back you up. In fact, that's like that teasing that you do when you want to give someone a compliment in that third world context, you know?
No, but it's leading up to my question, and because one of the silences that you've identified in North America is the silence around white supremacy, and this is something that you feel is often taboo, taboo in the United States, taboo here in Canada as well. What do you understand white supremacy to be? And why do you feel that we are so uncomfortable addressing it?
I mean, we're uncomfortable. I mean, I'll start with the back end of the question. I guess we're uncomfortable identifying power a priori. The nature of power is that it enacts an invisibility. The nature of power is that it erases itself. So it's the same way. It's like, how long does it take the average girl to realize that patriarchy is for fucking real? And that patriarchy makes it its life habit of killing women as an outcome of absolutely dominating and controlling them. It takes a while, and a lot of people collectively don't come to that awareness, you know? And certainly don't come to that awareness in any way that will allow them to sort of organize around it or, alter their lives around it. Because it's tough to deal with the hegemonic forces in our lives. In other words, the real forces that shape our social realities. And certainly I bring up patriarchy because patriarchy is one of the fundamental strakes through which these societies are all organized. It's really one of our, if this is a physical universe, it's one of the elementary particles. Another one of the elementary particles is white supremacy. I mean, Jesus, nothing makes that more explicit than the New World. And by white supremacy, I say we would most sort of, I think, simplistically describe this as a particularly malign racial ideology which privileges and prestiges all things European and creates a hierarchy, racial hierarchy, and a set of racial practices, and it creates a sort of racialized imaginary through which whiteness in its many multiple forms sort of, I think, benefits. And I think that the thing about white supremacy is that we misunderstand that when we say race, when we say our racial system, we're talking about white supremacy. White supremacy isn't about just white people. Like I always say this, but it's true. It's like and it's a global system, white supremacy. It's a global system. It's an outcome of what occurs in the New World and gets projected to the rest of the planet.
So how are all of us implicated in it?
Because it requires all of us to practice it. It's like patriarchy.
So give an example.
A good example is you take every single guy in this world and make them disappear, and patriarchy doesn't disappear. Women embody patriarchy without any men. Shit, if men had to actually expend energy to run patriarchy, we wouldn't do it. But luckily, women embody and enable and mobilize patriarchy, so women are controlling each other, helping the sort of domination, are keeping the value systems alive, And it's the same with race. It's like all of us are implicated, so I'll give you an example. It's like you go to my community, and let's say there's no white people. We're looking at a Dominican community entirely. Well, we are completely committed to the system of white supremacy. We'll look around and say, well, this person's a light-skinned person, and this person's a dark-skinned person, and this means something in this hierarchy. This person has European features, that person doesn't have European features. This means something, this hierarchy. The notions of what we call beauty are racialized. Our erotics are racialized. The thought that there's such a thing as love, separate from these systems, separate from patriarchy, separate from white supremacy, is insane. You know, when we grow up in a civilization which basically says that the default subject position is white and bourgeois, and that beauty, the default beauty of the universe, is a white woman. I mean, that notion is not only corrosive in its diabolical mendacity, you know, it's also so clearly a political manipulation. But for most of us, it's just considered a naturalized commonplace. It's just a given. So when you see a person of color in a position of beauty, that's striking. We're like, oh, that's an unusual departure from the default.
Mm-hmm.
You know? The same thing. It's like, and I think this is a system that ties us all together. It's not simply like, oh, white folks are the chief captains of white supremacy. If this was true, this shit wouldn't work. Certain sectors in the white community, you know, they benefit immensely. But in the end, this idea, this system, this ideology, this incredibly cruel hierarchical system engages us all in it.
And how do you go about then dismantling a system such as that?
Well, look, I'm no expert in this. I'm just a writer. It's like, but
you talk.
it's certainly,
you're just a writer, but you're someone who has chosen.
Well,
You know, you've chosen to speak often about this and loudly.
well, but people will. Well, look, gang. It's not. It's for me. It's sort of, Adrian. It's sort of straightforward. It's like first steps first. First step is for me, was you go take a class and suddenly discover every time we use the word race, that's exactly not what we're talking about. That, you know, sociologists and other folks in the know call this system white supremacy. Like, we can't even call it what it is, even though sort of all the social scientists have decided that this is what the system is. We still feel very uncomfortable, because to actually even say the word white, for most of us, is still very uncomfortable. You know, you'd be amazed how many people have no problem saying Asians this and black this, but when it's time to say white, they're like. Also, just go on any news article and comment and use the word black and Asian or native, and no one will say anything to you. But use the word white, and you'll get like 500 attacks from people trying to silence you from even describing white people. Because power doesn't want to be described. It doesn't want to be shown to be an interested minority. And for me, I guess the first step is, well, education doesn't hurt. And simply admitting the truth, you know, whether it's patriarchy or it's white supremacy, that there's these hegemonic systems, I just don't understand how, and for me, I couldn't imagine living without it. It seems like it is harder work to pretend. It takes a lot more work to deny than it does to just admit what's really going on. And I just found it was easier to live by being a little bit honest than just the enormous labors required to displace the facts that we all carry within our hearts. We know this shit is true. We know this shit is real. You know? We pretend it's not, and we'll argue with people that it's not, you know, but it doesn't take much for people to push someone, for someone to reveal their expertise in these systems. How many people so many people will say, oh, I don't see race. Yeah, I love that. I don't see race. It's like my favorite, you know? Walk in with a grenade and shut off the lights and say, right, you better tell me how many people here of color and what shade, or I'm going to set this grenade off. And those people will be like, that person is this. The very person who says they don't see race is like a fucking calculus racial machine, you know? And so I just don't understand how someone could live. It just seems like a lot of work, dude, to pretend this shit isn't happening. It seems like a lot of work. And as an artist, it just makes your life harder when you're going to spend half your time denying what the future will recognize as a given. You know? It's like, why bother? You know? Yeah.
We need more voices.
Yeah, but certainly, I think most of us find it very difficult to break the prohibition against identifying with our persecutors. Most of us, let's say if you're women, find it very hard to be like, dude, fucking patriarchy kind of fucking sucks, because you're rewarded by pretending it doesn't exist, right? How many times do I see this in class? I'll teach a group of students, and one young woman in class will reveal that she has a kind of a bit of a systemic knowledge around patriarchy. She'll be like, gee, there's a lot of rapes in this school. And suddenly she's the rape girl. Where the young woman who's like, oh, there's no rapes here, she's rewarded. People are like, she's badass, she's cool, but the woman who, you're just a fucking feminist. And I think we go out of our way to try to contain anyone who describes accurately the world we live in. And I think certainly we need more voices, but we also need to admit that we go out of our way to punish people who don't toe the party line. These are considered full-out democracies, and yet these democracies are exceptionally censorious around its main lines of power. And I think you're just as likely to have a conversation about white supremacy in the Dominican Republic as you are in Canada, which is to say almost absolutely not. Jesus Christ, I wrote an essay about white supremacy, and a couple weeks ago, literally it was directly about white supremacy, and a couple weeks ago, the New York Times characterized it as an essay about racial insensitivity. Which is like, writing an essay about sexual abuse and somebody describing it as, relational insensitivity. It's like, again, even our quote-unquote sophisticated organs don't have much interest in addressing this stuff accurately. Yeah.